So you're Blues captain Ryan O'Reilly, and you want a haircut that's as custom as your stick curve. At Great Clips, we save your haircut details in clip notes, so you get your signature look every time. We got you, and you got this. Great Clips, official hair salon of the NHL.
Sekeres Price from Wall Center and a presentation of Audi downtown Vancouver, where they have inventory. That's right. You can put yourself into a new Audi, skip the lines, get your vehicle sooner than a pre-order, and lock in your prices and your rates with the 2022s. The Q4s coming, Q3s, Q5s, Q7s, Q8s, and the A3, as well as the A8 and the S8 redesign that Blake Price was driving around. And that A8 in particular highlights all the new technology from Audi. Loads of options to suit you at the corner of Broad and 2nd and at Audi downtown Vancouver.ca. We're asking on the Bulldog poll question today, Andrei Kuzmenko, who does he make most expendable? Is it Brock Boeser, Connor Garland, Tanner Pearson? Or you can vote other at Sekeres and Price on Twitter. Bulldog, your trusted source of free casino games, poker strategy, and sports odds. Canadian Caleb Houston, he's a wing from the University of Michigan, did not participate in the NBA Combine, and that usually means the player has a first-round promise from some team out there. He's plus 250 to be a first-round pick tomorrow at the NBA Draft on your Bulldog line of the day. Here he is, our Wednesday insider from NHL on the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, just back from the Memorial Cup in St. John. Our pleasure to welcome Mr. Darren Dreger back to the program. How you doing?
I'm doing well. No real complaints. I mean, it's boring talking about air travel and the complications because mine were fairly minimal today. Bit of a delay, but all is well.
Well, glad to hear that. You enjoy your time at the Mem Cup in St. John?
Great time. Yeah, I mean, Eastern Canada, one of my favorite places not to just visit, but to work. I'd never been to St. John, but as you guys have experienced, when they host events like this, I don't think it's fair to call the Memorial Cup a smaller scale event. It's a big event. It's a big deal in St. John, and the people have embraced it. But they just make you feel like something special is going on, and you're a big part of it. So I got there Sunday, was fortunate enough to have a real beautiful dinner, a seafood feast, and then obviously took in the last couple of games. Bit disappointed, not going to lie, that I had to come back and inject myself into the Stanley Cup final, but that's a hard complaint to make as well. So all's well.
Well, we got news happening everywhere, including you were the lead item on Insider Trading yesterday with regards to the Vancouver Canucks. But let's start closer here. Not closer, but let's start on today's news. Paul Maurice, the new head coach of the Florida Panthers. What does that mean for Andrew Brunette, the finalist for the Jack Adams Trophy, Coach of the Year? And we know the Canucks are looking for lead assistants. Is there any chance, Dregs, that Brunette could wind up joining Boudreau's staff?
Well, Matt, I think you have to consider that there would be a chance. Andrew Brunette, I feel, is going to be a decent commodity. Who knows? There are still teams with head coaching vacancies, obviously, when you look at Detroit and you look at the Chicago Blackhawks, so maybe he lands on his feet automatically. Beyond that, why wouldn't you, if you're a team like the Vancouver Canucks, when you have some uncertainty in Bruce Boudreau, kick tires at least, have a conversation at least with Andrew Brunette, because in Brunette, you get a high-level assistant, not associate coach, and you get some automatic insurance that comes along with that as well. Brunette's respected. He is by basically every team across the National Hockey League. It's unfortunate and bizarre how things went down in Florida, to be fair. It's not like he took over the Florida Panthers with 15, 20 games left in the regular season. He did a really good job of keeping that team, directed. They win the President's Trophy. He's a Jack Adams finalist. Paul Maurice pops into the world, and Bill Zito and the Florida Panthers say, okay, well, this is too good to pass up. We need that level of experience. So I would be surprised if the Vancouver Canucks and a number of other teams don't investigate whether there could be a fit with Andrew Brunette.
Interesting.
It does sort of feel like he was done dirty there, though. As you point out, all of those accolades, I know they got swept in round 2 by the defending champs, but Dregs, they won a playoff series for the first time in a quarter century. He did something that like a whole bunch of other Florida Panther head coaches haven't been able to do.
Yeah, Jeff, just flat out bizarre. I don't know a better way to describe it. I mean, if you're just making a decision like this based on experience, okay, I get it, But again, Andrew Brunette took over in trying circumstance, and you have to give credit to the players because they didn't waver. With Joel Quenneville on the bench, you had a highly decorated NHL coach. It would have been easy for things to start to wobble, and that didn't happen. So Andrew Brunette absolutely deserves some credit. For me, the writing was on the wall, and it was becoming increasingly obvious when the assistants of the Florida Panthers were essentially let go very recently. McKenzie especially was one that I know Brunette was very, very tight with. Now, the Florida Panthers would tell you that, wow, we've extended the opportunity for Andrew Brunette to stay within the organization. And I believe that Paul Maurice would love to have Andrew Brunette on his staff. But based on how things have been handled by the Florida Panthers, I just feel like Andrew Brunette wants a fresh start. And he knows that he's going to have some options out there. So he's deeply disappointed, no doubt about that. But I also feel like he's ready to turn the page and get going elsewhere.
I'm curious, like, when you look at what's happened here in this coaching carousel. So Maurice is back in the league. Torts is back in the league. DeBoer and Cassidy, they jump from one team to another. There are still a bunch of openings there. Do you get a, like, is anybody going to inject some fresh blood? Like, you look at Jay Woodcroft and the job that he did in Edmonton and was able to deliver them to the third round. Like, we see the tried and true, and I get it. This is big money, and GMs want to, they don't want to gamble and take chances all the time. But some of these teams, like, do you see a team like Detroit or Chicago or Winnipeg perhaps taking a bit of a chance on some fresh blood at the coaching level?
Well, I guess the team that I would look at, Jeff, would be the Detroit Red Wings and Steve Yzerman. And good luck cracking that nut. Like, you're never getting a real good read on what Yzerman is thinking. He just doesn't play the game that way. Barry Trotz has got to land somewhere. So there again is another super experienced coach. Again, as we reported weeks ago now, he was thinking of maybe branching off into the management realm. Well, that hasn't surfaced yet, even though our colleague Pierre LeBrun last week reported that maybe there was an opportunity like that with Nashville. I'm told that he's told clubs that he wants to coach. His best fit for me, most likely, is Winnipeg, but that hasn't happened yet. Could he land in Detroit? Maybe, but I also hear that Detroit is waiting for the conclusion of the Stanley Cup final and may have interest in either Lalonde or Halpern, the assistants to John Cooper, the Tampa Bay Lightning, which also makes some sense. So if Detroit decides to go that way, then that's new. But who among us would be surprised if they land the big fish that's still out there and Barry Trotz? I mean, it feels like Trotz is going to land somewhere.
Before we get on to JT Miller and your report yesterday, lastly on the coaching side, Brad Shaw, you hearing anything about the Canucks assist and his chances in Chicago? And is there any world whereby he could join Torts in Philadelphia after the two were together and successful in Columbus?
Could happen. I haven't heard Brad Shaw's name in connection with John Tortorella and the Philadelphia Flyers. But, I don't know if we talked about this last week, Matt, but as of 2 weeks ago, I believe there were 43 coaches on expiring contracts.
That's right.
And that includes the NHL head coaches, but assistants. So, an individual with the experience level of Brad Shaw is going to find a soft landing somewhere. He was one of the early interviews in the Chicago Blackhawks process. Kyle Davidson and the Blackhawks people continued to kind of sort through their list and aren't divulging much in terms of where they're at, other than, coming out to say that it's not Ryan Huska. Again, given the level of experience from Brad Shaw, there's no reason to believe that he's not still in the mix with the Chicago Blackhawks, but they're continuing to keep their process somewhat under wraps.
Moving along to the lead item on Insider Trading yesterday about the Vancouver Canucks, with both JT Miller and Brock Boeser's names mentioned in trade talks. We're asking on our Bulldog poll question, who does Andrei Kuzmenko make the most expendable? And Boeser is on that list. I think it's fair to say that JT Miller was going to be a separate file altogether from Andrei Kuzmenko. But you tell me, Darren Dreger, is the signing of this Russian winger allowed them or got them looking a little more seriously at moving Miller and Boeser this summer?
Well, it's impossible to detach one from the other. I mean, you guys know this. The market was somewhat energized by Kuzmenko choosing Vancouver, and that's what happened here. He's a coveted free agent, and he chose Vancouver and the Vancouver Canucks. So that matters to every NHL club. You want to be a destination of choice, and that is the case here. Now, to connect Boeser or JT Miller to all of a sudden them having this asset for free, other than, of course, paying his 1-year entry-level contract salary, is maybe a bit of a stretch. We know what the cap situation for the Vancouver Canucks is. I think, guys, this is more driven by market activity, and the risk versus reward. They're going to continue to have conversations with the Boeser camp, of course, and with JT Miller, but there is a bit of a considerable risk when you drag a process out. You say, all right, well, maybe we don't have to deal with this now. Let's get into the season with JT Miller, going into his final year before he's an unrestricted free agent, and see how it goes. Maybe it'll work better, and at some point in the season leading up to the trade deadline. But based on the amount of activity, and I'll tell you what, you guys can see it because you know JT Miller's game especially so well. But look at the teams left standing in the Stanley Cup Championship. You need that grit and productivity, that balance, that combination. So I'm looking at the New York Rangers, who have been rumored to have continued interest in JT Miller, of course. I'm looking at the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm looking at every Stanley Cup playoff team that didn't go nearly as deep as they were hoping to. Now, you can't say that about the Rangers. They make it to the Eastern Conference Final. That's fine, but what's the price that you're willing to pay? And I think we're going to see some interesting names when you look at teams like Carolina and you look at the New York Rangers. The Vancouver Canucks want good young NHL players. They're not interested in stockpiling draft picks anymore. So if the market is as strong as it sounds like it is, then yes, Vancouver is open for business on those two guys especially.
Dregs, a guy like Brock Boeser in this market, there's two camps. There's the one that sees him as a goal scorer, and goal scorers are a commodity and they get paid. And then there are the ones that say, well, his foot speed has never been his biggest asset and the game's always getting faster. Like, how attractive a commodity do you think he is around the National Hockey League?
Still very attractive, because you do look at the body of the work here, and age especially. He's 25 years old, and he's coming off a difficult year, but I think we all have time for the why, right? I mean, personally, it was a very challenging year for the Boeser family. So I think that people look at what he can provide, and there's keen interest in Brock Boeser. You're not going to know exactly what the price is until you get into a trade negotiation. I don't think Patrick Allvin is going to have to convince too many people that at worst, Brock Boeser can be a good secondary scoring option.
The Washington Capitals and now Nicholas Backstrom going for a significant surgery. Does that make them a player here at all, Dregs? What have you heard about the Caps, who, needless to say, are going to have to fill a first-line center role while Backstrom recovers?
Yeah, super tough. Really, really difficult. That is a challenging surgery for sure, and the recovery process of it is long, but he obviously needed that level of attention. So, number one, the Washington Capitals are hopeful that Backstrom is going to make a full recovery beyond hockey. That's what's most important. They'll utilize his cap space. There's no doubt about that. There aren't players available of that magnitude on the open market. There just isn't. I'm sure that they'll engage in free agency when the window opens on July 13th. But before that, again, because of the cap implications, I'm sure that Brian McClellan is going to have his trade conversations. So haven't heard a lot about it because it's so fresh in terms of the announcement and everything that's gone into the detail work of the Backstrom situation. But, Washington, Brian McClellan, he's always very active. And he also knows the window in Washington, bit by bit, is closing. So I can't imagine that he leaves that spot unfilled going into next season.
What about Pittsburgh, Dregs, from whence Rutherford and Allvin came? As we know, they reacquired Kasperi Kapanen in Pittsburgh after moving him to the Toronto Maple Leafs. JT Miller is from that Eastern Ohio, Western, almost said Ontario and Quebec, Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania part of the world. Are they a place that you'd look at when looking at either a Miller or a Boeser trade?
Maybe, but again, it's all money related. And when I look at the Pittsburgh Penguins, I see all kinds of trouble. We continue to kick tires and try and talk about, excuse me, the Evgeni Malkin and the Chris Letang situation. They've got free agent issues coming out the yin yang. So maybe if management of the Pittsburgh Penguins, Ronnie Hextall, gets to a place where he knows he's just cutting bait on some of these guys, he can engage. But at the moment, I think he's got his hands full, at least trying to wrestle with two iconic figures in Malkin and Letang.
We had wondered about the Carolina right shot defensemen of D'Angelo and Ethan Bear. Both seemingly are on their way out of Raleigh, but you tell me, what are you hearing on those two? Because we know the Canucks don't have a lot of depth or quality at right side defense.
No, not a lot on Ethan Bear. And not to bury the kid, because I don't know a whole lot about his situation, but it's pretty obvious that things did not go well in Edmonton. Hence, Kenny Holland took advantage of a situation and moved him along. And then things did not go well for Ethan Bear in Carolina. In D'Angelo, different. Reclamation project, no doubt about that. If you're willing to put the past behind Tony D'Angelo, then you're getting a real good defenseman. A guy who can clearly be an offensive game changer. But you've got to be willing to put up with some of the other stuff. And from what I've heard, and I haven't heard this directly from Carolina, it's more from people around Tony. He's grown up a fair bit, right? And he realizes that he's got to keep it strictly to hockey. And when he does that, and when he manages his emotions on the ice, again, we can see how good a player he is. But I haven't heard anything specific relating Tony D'Angelo to the Vancouver Canucks. But why wouldn't he be an option? Why wouldn't he be an option that they might consider, depending on what the contract looks like and the dollar and all of that?
And then lastly, Dregs, we're being asked here a lot by Canuck Nation. We've got a couple Russian wingers now. Maybe time for a Russian centerman? What are you hearing on Malkin in Pittsburgh or Mikheyev in Toronto?
Yeah, well, it doesn't look like the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to have the room or the wherewithal to keep Ilya Mikheyev. And, that's too bad. He's going to be a significant loss. He probably should be more productive offensively than what he is. But, man, he's a workhorse, and he's an excellent penalty killer. He can flat out fly. So his skill set is going to be coveted by a lot of clubs. It just doesn't seem like Toronto, again, is going to have the cap space to invest there. He's going to have lots of options. Evgeni Malkin is focused on the Pittsburgh Penguins. But, any sort of discussion or movement with Francis, with Ron Hextall in Pittsburgh has been incremental. But again, that speaks to what we just talked about with how much work that Hexy and the group in Pittsburgh have to do. Malkin wants to stay there. He wants to retire as a Pittsburgh Penguin. But if they can't get a deal done, a deal that has a bit of term left at a value that JP Barry and CAA Hockey believes that Malkin should still command, then they're going to have to go to the open market. But anytime I ask about it, guys, you still get the same response. The Russian players especially, they love New York, they love Florida, and they love LA. Yeah. So not saying Vancouver is a no-go, but I'd be a bit surprised.
And just before anyone puts me on ease and O's, I know Mikheyev is a winger. Malkin is the centerman. Wonderful stuff, Dregs. Boy, it's starting to get really interesting, and we think there could be a ton of activity around this team in particular as we march towards the entry draft. Well, first, I guess the restricted free agents, some of the qualifying offers, and then the entry draft in Montreal. Thank you for this. Glad you got home safe in one piece. We'll catch up next week, my friend.